Hello, my name is John Hasegawa, and this is the Eye on Arts. Today we are at the Jefferson Street Studio with Paul Ajo, looking at his artwork.
Hey, John.
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Nice to be here. Thanks for arranging to do this with me.
Yeah, it's nice to see you.
Yeah. Well, as you know, we're here on the event of an exhibition that I was invited to present by Helene and Bob Davis, who are the proprietors, the owner, and artists who both live and work and exhibit here at Jefferson Street Studios to, in some essence, just to introduce myself to the community, the arts community of Paducah. And given the opportunity at their invitation, I decided that I would effectively like to do that and showcase a number of different things that I do in terms of artistic practice. And today I'd like to, we're going to look at some of those things and talk about the things that perhaps make the connections between those different disciplines. The practices of painting, which perhaps I'm best known for, the practice of printmaking, which I did my graduate studies in, and that of photography, which is where I actually started in my college career education. I've been painting since I was very, very young. Right? I've been painting and selling paintings actually since I was like 11 or 12 years old. But when I went to school, my thoughts were that I would study photography and make a career in photography. And so I made my pursuit in that direction initially, and for better or worse decided at some point it might be easier to make a living as a painter. Right? Well, the advent and the popularization of contemporary photography in the past perhaps 15 or 20 years has certainly shown how wrong you can be, but I'm very, very pleased to be here in Paducah serving as the instructor in digital photography for the Paducah School of Art. As you know, you teach there and teach ceramics for them. Mm-hmm. And to have the ability, again, just to sort of introduce a variety of things to my students of photography and the community at large to what I do as a painter.
Oh, great. Mm-hmm. So we're here looking at your show, and we see some paintings hanging behind us. We also see there's some other work that's over there and along the back wall. There's a large diversity of work kind of shown in one gallery of different types of media. Can you please tell us about how this show kind of works together and your kind of idea for putting this show together?
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, initially, again, as I said, the idea was to provide some sort of introduction to what I do as an artist to the community. And again, my practice, whether it's because I have the training or simply because my personality, I'm restless, I like to do a variety of different disciplines. The paintings that I'm showing are sort of the culmination, the ongoing process of around 20 years worth of research, right? And they come out of a body of work that was about, they were abstract paintings, brush paintings that were made based on the interface between the land and the sea, the ocean and the terrain. As you know, I'm a surfer, and I've done a considerable amount of travel in pursuit of that vocation. And as such, I've seen these remarkable places and been remarkable places that are like really sort of dangerous and edgy places, but beautiful in that regard. And so I was making large paintings, maybe 3 panels wide, 180 inches across and 80 inches tall. And they just became so laborious, to brush paint them, and that sort of facture that goes with really good brush painting, that layering and layering and layering. And at a certain point, I just said, if it's tedious for me, it's got to be tedious for my audience as well, right? So I said, I'm just going to break out of it, right? And so about 20 years ago, I just decided to break out of it, and I completely abandoned, almost completely, still to this day, the use of brushes in my work, right? I made friends of mine laugh by saying to kill the tyranny of the paintbrush, right? Oh. Right? Because again, the brush is a device that has a particular, it has a particular mark. It's a mark-making tool of sorts. So I began making these paintings that soon became apparent were sort of in the style of our friend Gerhard Richter, the very famous German painter who was making large paintings about the same time that I started this body of work. He was introducing a line of paintings where he was making big poles with squeegee-like devices of heavy oil paint material. And as his work became more apparent, it became more apparent that my work looked too similar to his, that I couldn't be the South Florida Gerhard Richter, right? Yeah. But I was still enamored by this methodology, and this notion, having been in printmaking and having built surfboards and done laminations on surfboards, this practice of using a squeegee was something that I had established skill sets in, and I was really enjoying the sort of all-at-oneness of the act of putting down a passage of paint, a passage of information. So I basically just worked out my own language that was more about a layering of information and pattern making that perhaps has more to do with, again, this sort of experience of sitting on a surfboard and looking through the surface of water and seeing what's going on underneath, this sort of fugitive interaction of surfaces of information and color and form and such, and to use it as a strength and to make a body of work that had, my signature rather than ultimately what was going to become Mr. Richard's signature, right? Yeah. And of course today he's the biggest money-making artist on the planet, and he's as famous as a man can get within the world of contemporary art. But he likewise, interestingly, makes several types of art as well. And he makes a body of paintings that are based on photographs. They're generally large grayscale paintings. This huge set of 3 panels in the Museum of Modern Art. I'm pretty sure that you've seen it. It occupies the entire wall of one of the big rooms there. It's just this monumental realist painting by the same person who makes these monumental abstract paintings. And so I think that basically if we're going to learn anything from contemporary art and artists, Picasso forward, is that it's okay to break out of the mold and break your own rules. And if you're an artist and you're living and practicing by your own set of self-imposed restrictions, it seems to me you're kind of missing the point. So I like this sort of sense of exploration and the ability to try to find the connections between things in the photographs, the prints, and the paintings.
Wow. So you have some pretty precise line work going on, and your composition is pretty complicated. So that's all done with different size squeegees, and you drag it through the paint?
All of the forms themselves they're generally either these sort of surfboard-looking forms. Mistakenly, they look like surfboards. They don't really have anything to do with that, but people who know that I'm a surfer will find that association. I see them just as sort of more active things. They're like the things that are penetrating into this space, right? So that they have a certain interaction with the space of the painting. But they're created in one process with a squeegee and this sort of pulling of paint. And the whole process of making a painting is establishing a certain strategy for bringing the painting from an unknown beginning to an unknown end, right? So that and that's what makes them engaging to make as well, is that, okay, so I'll be starting a new body of work, and I might start anywhere between 12 or 20 panels at one point in time, right? And then the trick is to change the game enough that the paintings don't look like the same group of paintings that were the last group of paintings, right? But again, they're all done with creating certain strategies and pulling material across, and basically much like, and this is where the connections come in between the paintings, the prints, and photography, is that they rely in large measure on the same sort of layering practices that are common to Photoshop, where you build images and you do image edits in a space that is then compounded, so you're creating layers and putting a layer on top of a layer, and traditional printmaking, where you have a matrix that's carrying information, a plate, a stone, a screen, whatever, and you're printing one on top of another. So the paintings are a compilation of many sort of discrete and articulate acts, right?
Yeah. Right. So that's how you create that, is it just that wonderful layered effect on your paintings?
Right. So sometimes it's a matter of covering the entire painting at once, right? With a certain strategy of either opaque or transparent colors, or a sort of selection of banded colors, or whatever it is that the circumstances that I'm defining those circumstances. So with the big paintings that we see behind us, much of this information, like all of this sort of horizontal stuff from one end of the painting to the other, is created in one act with a large squeegee, right? So I've got this big wooden device, and it carries a piece of foam core, and I've got 2 handles on this, and a weight in the middle of it, and a weight on the sides, and you kind of just walk this thing backwards and try not to have it do this or whatever it is. So, as I said, I've been doing this in some sort of developmental process for almost 2 decades. So getting reasonably good at it.
Yeah, so you only allow yourself one pass at it too.
Yes.
So.
And well, and if you botch it, you just have to change the plan. But in terms of composing the things, it's all sort of live,
Yeah.
I mean, none of it is drawn out in advance. None of these things are masked off or taped. The big divides are masked, and there's some masking and some taping involved, but primarily it's really, really direct, right? And that's what I'm really in search of, is a really direct sort of process that has its own integrity, right? That's consistent with itself, right?
So through this process, how do you know when your painting is done? I mean, do you just one day you look at it and say, hey?
Was it Adolf Gottlieb said, when my wife tells me? That doesn't work for me, I'm not married. So again, it's a strategy of, a lot of what I do is this sort of business of these sort of split fields, right? And I call them shotgun marriages, where you're creating passages of visual information that have their own personality but have to find the reconciliation with their partner, right? So it's this back and forth sort of process to find that balancing point. Right? Where's the balance? So there's tension and yet resolve, right? So there's this sort of uneasy truce, or there's an easy truce. It depends on the painting, right? And that sort of fuels the dynamic of, and the poetry of them, right?
Yeah. So you use a similar process for your prints?
The prints actually come from digital photographs of the paintings. So when the paintings are complete, I'll take a color photograph of the finished painting and I'll discard all of the color information. And I'll run it through a filter, or it's a mode adjustment called threshold, which is basically just like doing a film value separation from yesteryear. Anybody who's been around long enough to remember how using a copy camera and Kodak ortholith film would know that, basically you can make all of the values that are past a certain point of gray, black, and all the other values turn clear, right? And the film is output from that digital information. So we end up with a large, however large it is that you need, piece of opaque or transparent film, which is then used to expose a photosensitive plate. In this case, they're zinc plates. All of the prints that I've done for the past 20 years measure 18 by 18 inches square. Okay. And I will combine plates. I have like this library, as it were, of deeply etched plates. So I've exposed the plates and then they're etched like a traditional etching, right? The difference being that these are etched for a very, very long period of time in order to create a raised and a recessed surface. Sure. So unlike traditional, let's say, aqua tinting, where you would bite the plate for anywhere between, 3 seconds and 25 minutes to achieve a range of value of light to dark, right? These are plates that are etched in a straightforward, what's called an open bite fashion for upwards of 8 hours. Wow. Right? So they're very deeply bitten, so I can ink the recessed areas, ink the raised areas at the same time. It's called simultaneous color printing. Sure. It's something that was invented by Stanley Hayter, the Atelier Hayter in Paris before the wars. And then those plates are printed, multiple plates together. So I recombine aspects of the painting. So I take like the digital output from a finished painting and combine it with the digital output from another finished painting to create a new and original work, and to orchestrate the printing. So the printing isn't a mechanical process, the printing is an organic process, right? To orchestrate the printing, the relationship of the colors, the density of the colors, the positioning of the plates, which plates together and whatever, to create prints that some of them have maybe 5 inked zinc plates with maybe 7 or 8 different colors carried by 5 plates. The whole process might take 3.5 hours to make a single impression, sure. Right? Wow. And then if it's no good, hello, it's a big cleanup at the end of the day, right?
So the paper is actually getting embossed pretty much, right?
The paper is,
you've etched it down so much.
Right. And so when you're printing with that many plates, of course, you've got the hazard of keeping the sheet the same size because paper expands when it gets wet and it shrinks when it dries, and there's a lot of risk involved. So
paper can even tear, right?
Yeah, if the embossment is too deep, right? So that sort of brings us then to the beauty of digital printmaking, right? Which is the marvels and the glories of Epson printers, right? And that they are so remarkable. And but they have their own finesse and their own art as well. So and that's part of what we deal with when we teach digital photography, as you know, at the school, is training people how to become more masterful and hopefully eventually masterful printmakers. And that digital photography, much like printmaking, traditional printmaking, is an art form that's about making prints in large measure, right? And that's what we produce as objects, as photographers.
So talk about your digital photo work that you have hanging on the wall. Most of it, I noticed, is from Paducah.
Yeah. I mean, large measure, I wanted to make a point of specifically showing things that I had taken images of since I arrived in Paducah, right? There are actually two bodies of work on display here. One is from a suite of images that I made, I don't know, about 5 years ago. It's called The Impossibility of ... And they're water photographs of the same location at an inlet in South Florida. That's a very sort of dramatic place. The ocean comes into the intercoastal waterway there through a very, very narrow channel. So there is this venturi that occurs there, this phenomena where the water is moving above and there's water moving below, and it does these sort of morphine effects to the surface of the water that's different depending upon the time of day, the wind conditions, the tide, whether it's coming in, going out, or whatever. So it's about the fact that even though it's like a singular space, this is all taking place largely within the same 3 square meters, that there's this enormous range of variety in these photographs.
Fits really nicely with your layering.
And it does as well about that, right. So there's a group of those photographs. There's a small selection of what were 40 such photographs. I had an exhibition in South Florida where I paired these sort of the different personalities, the bright side and the dark side of Boynton Inlet. Several people have died in Boynton Inlet, boat accidents and such. I was almost a statistic there once, but we won't go into that. I had a boat that the rudder broke as I was coming into Boynton Inlet, and we had to sort of thread the needle without steerage. That was a trick, but another thing. So anyway, it's an interesting sort of historic place. So there's that group of photographs, and then there are photographs which are more about the relationship of different things that I've seen in Paducah, that I've tried to conjoin these things together to create some sort of either much like, again, with a painting, something that begins to spark meaning and recognition and some sort of reading. You know, like we know that photographs, we read photographs, right? We look at them, they're either visually poetic and just strikingly beautiful on their own accord, or they carry stories or narratives or tell about things or, you know, reveal things about the world, okay? So by trying to put together certain images that they seem to resonate for whatever reason, you know, and sometimes it's purely visual, right? And sometimes with the photograph called Boogeyman, it's really about, there's what they call a backstory in contemporary art. I'm sure that, you know, that's the sort of, forgive the pun, but that's the backbone of contemporary art, is the backstory, right? And so we try to keep a foot in both camps and make them work on a purely visual level, right? And to make them work on a level that might resonate with people who are hungry for that sort of content, right? So, you know, again, my favorite line is, I talk to my students, I say, complexity is king, you know? Simplicity is a ruse. So that's my sort of philosophy. That's my world philosophy. So, you know, I've got these enormously complex paintings, but we are enormously complex creatures, right? We're hungry for it, right? Right. And, you know, so the paintings have this sort of slow dazzle to them. They reveal themselves sort of slowly, right? So it's not like a Kenneth Nolan painting of yesteryear, which is the concentric circles, the sort of bullet, you know, the bullet map paintings that were popular in the 1960s, that color field stuff, which was very sort of immediate. You know, you see it, you get it. A Frank Sella painting, you see it, you get it. I'm about something that's really fugitive and sort of unfolds, and that you can look at it again according to this and then sort of according to that, you know?
There's like, you're right, there's like a simplicity, but then it's so complicated. Your paintings are just, I can look at them for, I feel like hours. And you see different, you see the colors shift, and then you see the way the composition kind of comes together, and then your eye moves to a different place, and there's another relationship that I see. It's amazing.
Yeah, I want to keep them really active.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I just find it amazing that you don't plan it out ahead of time, that it just kind of happens. You know, you do a part and then you look at it and you do another part. You look at it, because I would have to have it completely planned ahead of time.
Oh, I couldn't do that, you know. It would be like, forgive me, it would be like having a job, you know. I'd rather have a job, you know. But I have a job. I have a job teaching, and I enjoy that, and that requires a certain sort of focus, and you know, and these require a certain sort of focus as well. Obviously, it requires one acute decision after another. They're not random. They're just a cumulative decision-making process. Okay, so this form went here, then this form has to go here. Okay, now that those two forms are there, this form has to go here, and okay, so let's see what, you know, sometimes half of the painting is completely masked, and it's a matter, if you've got 20 paintings going at a time, remembering what's going on this side and making that, you know, making the reconciliation happen over here. And again, in some measure, that's true with the photographs as well, you know, where I play with these relationships, and it's about the interval, it's about the, you know, the width of this passage of information to the width of this, and how they carry weight, and, you know, all the sort of visual things that we learn in art school, right?
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, your photo, I see a contrast in your photographs, because your photographs seem very unmanipulated, where these, like your paintings and your prints, I can see the long history of the process that you had to go through. It's kind of I find that a very interesting contrast between the work.
Well, on the other hand, I've got another complete body of digital work that's highly manipulated, right? And I just didn't want to, like, further confuse the viewer, right? I was like, okay, you know what I mean? Right, right. So, you know, I make images that look like these paintings through the Photoshop process, completely, without any photographic beginnings, right? And then I have works where I will, you know, overlay Photoshop information, like conjoin these paintings with photographs. And in fact, I did that for a big project in South Florida before I came here. I did a large art and state buildings program project for Florida Atlantic University as part of their public art progress, where they wanted the artwork to sort of be about public awareness for the perils of the Indian River Lagoon, because the campus was located in Martin County in the Indian River Lagoon. The terminal end of the lagoon is there at the Port St. Lucie Inlet. So I'm going, Jesus, they selected me for this process, but I showed them abstract paintings. How am I going to do this, you know? So what I really did was I went to the Savannah Preserve in the Indian River Lagoon, and I took photographs of the local terrain, and I manipulated those photographs and combined them with passages from paintings, and created this sort of hybrid between photographic and abstract information, and then used those in conjunction with straight paintings to make something that I could, you know, I could tell the story with, right? And the story was about, you know, the economic value and the hazards that we're presenting to the beauty and the value of the Indian River Lagoon to the state of Florida. And, you know, you probably don't know because you don't live there, but, you know, there are huge strains on that entire system, and it's one of the most environmentally diverse ecosystems on the planet. But you've got a huge agricultural industry out west, the sugarcane industry, and all of that stuff is constantly dumping pollutants into, you know, and into the watershed is constantly polluted. So there are real dangers there for the Indian River and the health of 80% of the fish that swim in the seas off the coast of Florida. Yeah. You know, it's the breeding ground. It's the starting place for what happens out in the deeper water. Right? So anyway, that's just a sort of spin-off on this particular group of work. Yeah, I consciously wanted to make things that were not conspicuously manipulated, and the combinations have these sort of blunt, sort of, you know, they're real straightforward, as you said, right?
And I like the way how you talk about how you can read things into it. When I look at that, especially the Paducah photographs, I'm sitting there thinking, so what is he trying to say about Paducah when he's putting these photographs up? And then, you know, or I was trying to think, is this just a contrast of imagery that he's putting together just to make us see things in a new way?
Sometimes it is strictly about keeping your eyes open and seeing the world in a different way. Like, well, look, I never, you know, look at the connection between just the visual aspects of these, or again, is there a narrative there? And if I can put the narrative into play, well, all artwork is largely a mirror of the person that's looking at it, right? Other than perhaps literary forms where you basically are truly telling a story. Otherwise, you're just putting somebody's own powers into process, their own imaginative powers into process, right? So they're trying to generate meaning from it, because that's what we want to do. You look at my paintings and go, well, you know, what's that about? You know? Well, it reminds me of, there's this funny little cartoon. I collect art cartoons from like the New York Times or from wherever, right? And there's the one of a man and a woman sitting in front of a painting, and she's looking over at him, like looking at him kind of dismissively, saying, well, for that matter, what's the meaning of you? You know? You know? Like, does it have to have meaning? You know? It's also just here in the world like you are, and, you know, look at it and make a connection with it somehow, you know? Yeah. So that's one of, you know, I have this little library of cartoons that are there.
I just want to, from seeing all his work, I just want to see like basically everything that you've done now, because I know that you have a pretty long history of artwork, and went to your Facebook page. I saw some of your oval paintings; those look awesome. And I saw some of the images of you working in your studio, just a massive studio, and just you talking about your squeegee. I just really want to see you working now, because I think it must be just quite a process.
Well, I'm very, very happy to have a studio here in Paducah, and we'll certainly make that opportunity happen. Also, you would see on the Facebook site, I would think, is that there's a lot of photography that dates back for decades about the places that I've traveled surfing. So I've always like carried that with me, that whole sense of, you know, I've always been a photographer from the beginning forward, and I've got, you know, 25 or 30 years worth of what largely might otherwise to amount to like travel photography. But it's all these sort of, the ability to have, you know, taken these photographs, being at exotic places, having spent 6 weeks in Peru 25 or 30 years ago, and 6 weeks in Java, and to travel to Nusa Lembongan and Sumbawa and Jakarta and these exotic places, to have that opportunity, you know, it comes at a price, but it's like, you know, it's like double your pleasure. I'm there doing the surfing thing and doing the photography thing, and it's all cool. And, you know, you have your memories, then you have the photographs when you come back, you know. And they have a longer life than perhaps your memories. Yeah.
Paul, so we're almost done. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I would just say that it's been fun chatting it up with you a bit, and having the opportunity to share some thoughts with the greater area around Paducah and some of the students at the School of Art. And just to remind everybody, if they're not aware of the Paducah School of Art, that it's a component of the Western Kentucky Community and Technical College, and that we have a remarkable program, this AFA program, Associate of Fine Arts program. And from my personal perspective, we have a extraordinary facility for the digital photography program. We've got a great lab, we've got great computers, big beautiful printers, and we just invite everybody who has an interest in photography to take advantage of a resource in the community.
Thank you, Paul. My name is John Hasegawa, and you've been watching Eye on Arts.